For those of you wondering why I didn't talk about the biggest winners and losers in the 2017 NBA draft in the draft recap video, very simple. Content, baby. Why do one video about it when you can split it into two? I'm just saying. Plus, I wanted to make sure I devoted my own time and enough energy to talk about this particular topic. So that's what I'm going to do. Well, let's talk about the biggest winners and losers in the 2017 NBA draft that just finished last night. I'm going to start off with the winners. And before I do, mind you, I understand talking about winners and losers, especially when it comes to an NBA draft, it can be incredibly risky because so many of these kids drafted are 19 to 20 years old. How the hell do we even know what they're going to be? What do we know about these organizations and what they're going to look like in a couple of years? And all of those points are 1,000% true. So this is just a stab at it, an attempt to make something out of what we just saw. So let me talk about the winners first. Let's start off with the positives. I thought the Phoenix Suns got a big win by being able to stay put at number 4 and having Josh Jackson fall into their lap. There's a chance that Josh Jackson develops into the best two-way player out of this draft class. He filled a major position of need at the 3 for them. He's a guy that could defend at the NBA level, I believe, anywhere from the 1 to the 4. Playing in the Western Conference in an up-tempo style could really benefit him tremendously. I love that pick for the Phoenix Suns, and they didn't have to do anything to get him. He just fell right into their laps. Speaking of falling into their laps, the Charlotte Hornets. You're thinking about it's one of these things where, Luke Kennard from Duke just strikes you as a Michael Jordan, Charlotte Hornets type of pick. He's a guy that played at a bigger name school in the ACC, safer type of prospect, limited maybe in terms of his upside. So I thought that's where they were going to go. Well, they didn't because they allowed the draft to kind of play out ahead of them. And what did they do? They were able to get by far what I think is the clearly best shooter in this entire draft in Malik Monk, a guy who can give you buckets in bunches. And when he's hot, he can be scary to watch, and be able to line him up at the backcourt at times next to Kemba Walker, and being able to get him at 11, not having to move up, not having to do anything, just letting him fall right to you. I thought it was one of the real steals of the first round, and it was outstanding luck for the Charlotte Hornets that it just kind of bore out that way. And then later on in the second round, being able to get a versatile role player off the bench in Frank Jackson, a guy that could play some combo guard for them off the bench. He could play some backup point to Kemba. He could play some backup 2 guard to Malik Monk and maybe Batum. I really like what the Charlotte Hornets did. Kept it kind of simple here, and I thought it worked out really well for them. And they still got their guy from a big ACC school. So everybody wins. The Los Angeles Lakers. And this all ties into what happened before the draft. Yes, I understand that trading D'Angelo Russell 2 years into his career could be viewed as risky, potentially very, very risky. I understand that, and I get that, and there's a chance that D'Angelo Russell could go to Brooklyn and absolutely light it up and potentially be an all-star down the road. And in that sense, that is very possible. But being able to ship off the contract of Mozgov that was completed and fulfilled by a previous regime to sit there and get rid of the last 3 years of his deal, and in particular, more importantly, the last 2 years of his deal, to bring in an expiring contract in Brook Lopez, getting an additional first-round pick in the process, was a huge win for the Lakers. It's all about that 2018 offseason. It's all about Paul George and LeBron James for them, and this helps to position them to where they could be a really appealing option for those 2 guys and really be a contender for the services of one, if not both of them. Then to be able to sit there at number 2 and get their guy in Lonzo Ball, and ultimately he was their guy. It's one of these things where whether or not he's the best player or the second best player in this draft, only time will tell. But there were just so many things pointing to the fact that Lonzo Ball was the right guy for this team at this time. And then later on in the draft, being able to get Josh Hart at the tail end of round 1, getting a guy that could space the floor for Lonzo, getting a guy that could shoot the ball, a guy that has hit some big shots, comes from a national champion at Villanova. So you got some big game experience. You got a guy in Hart that can come in and contribute right away. I absolutely love the pick of Josh Hart for the Lakers. I expect him to contribute some minutes right away as a rookie because he's ready to play in the NBA now for what his role is going to be. This ultimately will come down to Lonzo Ball and how well Lonzo Ball plays at the NBA level. If he is a star, then the Lakers look golden going forward. If he's Michael Carter-Williams, then we got some issues and problems. Only time will tell. But being able to get rid of Mozgov's contract off of the books, get Brook Lopez's expiring contract, clearing D'Angelo Russell's head caseness out of the damn locker room, drafting Lonzo Ball, getting an additional first-round pick. I thought the Lakers did very well for themselves on Thursday night. I also really like the Sacramento Kings draft. In terms of draft selections, maneuvering in the draft, they were the winners of the night. For me at number 5, to be able to get De'Aaron Fox, the perfect choice for them, the only real choice for them, the guy for them to fall into their laps. To me, it's flash tag. This is a flaming take here, but I think De'Aaron Fox is a future star. I think De'Aaron Fox is a guy that can move the needle for the Sacramento Kings organization in a big-time way relatively quickly. And to be able to get him at number 5, where a couple of weeks ago you were considering giving up 5 and 10 to move up to the Lakers pick at number 2 to make sure you got De'Aaron Fox, to be able to sit there at number 5 and keep that 10th overall pick ended up being a stroke of genius and a stroke of luck, frankly. As you're watching the draft play out Thursday night, you don't even recognize this organization. You're sitting there and saying, last year it looked like Vlade ran the draft. This year it looks like somebody who actually knows what the hell they're doing ran this draft. Because then to sit there and take pick 10 and flip it to picks 15 and 20 in a trade down with the Blazers, to be able to get an experienced wing like Justin Jackson with some national championship big game experience, who fits very well, who could space the floor for Fox at the 3, was outstanding. And then at pick 20, to be able to be in a position to roll the dice on a guy who, if healthy, would have been a top 5 pick in this draft, and Harry Giles, and to be able to get him at pick 20, he's a higher risk, high reward type of gamble. I know he's kind of injury prone, but he's the type of guy at this point in time, especially when you've already had 2 first-round picks, he's the type of guy you gamble on. He's the type of guy that you blow your load on and you sit there and say, I hope to God it doesn't come screaming back and giving me a facial. You hope to God that it works. Because if it does, this entire draft was a real organization changer for the Kings. It's not the be-all, end-all. It is only a start. But if you were going to sit there and say your team was going to start off with these 3 guys in round 1 in a complete and total rebuild, you'd feel good about the beginning steps of that process. And then in round 2, to be able to get a guy like Frank Mason III, the consensus National Player of the Year, a guy that could be a quality role player at times, and maybe you want to throw Fox at the 2 when you're sitting there giving Buddy Hield some rest. Maybe you want to sit there and have Mason be the primary backup long-term to De'Aaron Fox. Mason's a guy that can score. He could do some things. A quality role player. So there are 4 draft picks I all thought were home run picks for them in terms of their fit, in terms of what they could do, in terms of what they represented, where they got them at. I loved what the Sacramento Kings did in terms of taking their draft pick currency and maximizing the bang for their buck and getting the maximum return. I don't know if there's a team in this draft that did better than them. There's only one team that did better than them, period, in this draft, and that was the Minnesota Timberwolves. They were able to take, now mind you, a point guard who I like, but barely played last year in Chris Dunn, a talented shooting guard with, feature this, a guard that tore an ACL playing for Tom Thibodeau, and draft position to get a multi-time All-Star who fits perfectly with your head coach's system, potentially as well a quality role-playing big man in Justin Patton with lots of athleticism and tons of upside. An incredible night for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just absolutely incredible. To be able to come out of this draft with a real deal 2-way all-star in the league and to get a big man with some real upside, and all you had to give up was Zach Lavine, who's going to be in the last year of his rookie contract, coming off of a torn ACL, Chris Dunn with bad shoulders, who barely played any kind of key role for the Timberwolves in his rookie season, and Larry Markkinen. You have to love what the Timberwolves did. You just have to. I mean, this is a direction changer for the organization. This puts them in the playoffs. This puts them in the mix. This means the Timberwolves are serious. So hats off to them. But then we get to the losers. And I'm going to start off with the Philadelphia 76ers. And this won't be a popular choice, but hear me out. Think big picture here. They traded up from 3-1 to get Markelle Fultz, who there's no real guarantee of him being the absolute unequivocal top guy in this draft. Also, you gave up a potential marquee pick in terms of the first round in 2018 or 2019, depending on how things play out, to move up 2 spots to get a guy who might not be the best player in this draft class. if we're talking about trust the process, I don't trust questionable decisions. And this seems like a very questionable decision to me. I would have rather stayed at 3 and kept that potentially high first-round pick in one of the next 2 drafts as opposed to going up to 1 and getting Markelle Fultz. With that said, I think Markelle Fultz is a great fit for them. I envision him being a future 19 to 20 point per game scorer when Philadelphia, with the talent around him, the situation and position that he's going to be in. But then to sit there and trade back into round 1 and get Orlando's pick at 25 ultimately and take another foreign big man and then 2 more foreign big men in round 2. Look, Pasekniks, Bolden, Lessort, they're all NBA players. I don't dispute that. But Jesus Christ, how many fucking big men do you need? In particular, how many foreign big men are you going to fucking draft and stash? You already have Jahlil Okafor, where you haven't been able to trade, and you don't know what the hell you're going to do with him, and nobody even talks about him being part of the damn process. You've got Joel Embiid, who's great when healthy, but that's the problem. He can't stay healthy. You've got Dario Saric, who's a nice role player, but you take 3 more freaking potential draft and stash big men. At some point in time, when is enough enough, especially when you still have Gudaitis and Mitrovic in terms of other foreign big men you took in a previous draft and you stashed? You've got all these foreign big men. At some point in time, you got to start addressing other positions. And people aren't going to want to give up a lot to trade for these guys. So what? You could get other future second-round picks, so that way you could draft other draft and stash players that will never play for you? Makes no fucking sense to me. Wasn't a horrible night for him. I wasn't a fan of some of the things that they did. The Denver Nuggets, trading down 11 picks. Yeah, they got Trey Lyles and Tyler Lydon, but maybe they should have just stayed put and taken Donovan Mitchell. Maybe they should have. Maybe they should have stayed put and taken somebody like Bam Adebayo. Maybe they should have stayed put and taken Justin Jackson. I know the Nuggets were in one of these positions where you could say they didn't have a ton of clear and present needs, but I thought they could have done better here. Just because you can trade down doesn't always mean it's a better choice for you. The Indiana Pacers failed to trade Paul George on draft night and failed to leverage people against each other effectively. Bottom line is the clock is ticking for the Pacers to be able to get anything for Paul George before he leaves in free agency next offseason. And with their inability to get Paul George out of the way, get some type of draft pick currency here, the Pacers have to be losers, period. Phil Jackson's Twitter mentions, they were on fire for the past couple of days, and who could blame anybody? Why the fuck would Phil want to trade Kristaps Porzingis? Why would you be butthurt about him skipping an exit interview? Who cares? Worry a little less about a stupid-ass exit interview and worry a little bit more about being better at your damn job. The same knucklehead who didn't like Carmelo Anthony, doesn't want him, but then gives him a bunch of money for many years just to sit there and undercut him and sabotage him every fucking chance he gets. Now you want to do the same thing with one of the young, bright stars in the NBA? A 7'3", foreign white boy that can fucking ball. Who the fuck does this? Who the fuck does this? This dude could potentially be Dirk in the making, and you're trying to trade him because you have to do what's best for your ball club? Ding dong, dumb dick! The best thing for your ball club is keeping Kristaps Porzingis right now. Unbelievable. And then you drafted a French point guard when you still had Dennis Smith and Malik Monk on the board. Might not be a huge deal, but frankly, I thought both of those guys were better players. So, not a great night for Phil Jackson's Twitter mentions. And then the Chicago Bulls were the biggest losers of all. Where do I even begin? They traded a franchise player, and for the Chicago people that want to say, well, you won't win anything with him, he wasn't really a franchise player. Mind you, you guys are some of the same fucks that actually bought Jerry Krause's bullshit when you thought Elton Brand was going to be a franchise player, and then a couple of years later, Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler were going to be fucking franchise players, tried to justify playing Marcus Fizer at the goddamn 3, thought Ben Gordon was ultimately going to be the second greatest Chicago Bull of all time, trailing only Michael Jordan and surpassing Scottie fucking Pippen! Same idiots that thought the Bulls with Derrick Rose as their leader and fucking Thibodeau as their coach was ever anywhere close to uprooting the Heat and being an NBA championship type of level team. Give me a fucking break. What the fuck would you know? Here's what I know. The Chicago Bulls just traded a multi-time, two-way playing all-star for an unproven point guard, a two-guard coming up at the end of his rookie deal, who you're going to have to consider investing potentially big money on, coming off of a torn ACL and a finesse big. And then gave up pick 16 when you shouldn't have fucking had to. Like, you look at this deal and you're like, yeah, the Bulls got something back, but what did they really get back? It sure doesn't look like they got a franchise player in return. Looks like they got some guys and they got some pieces. I will admit, if they would have kept pick 16, and I throw Justin Patton into this situation and say on draft night they came away with Zach Lavine, Chris Dunn, Lauri Markkanen, and Justin Patton, I feel a lot better about the Bulls draft haul here. I feel like they could have gotten 4 potential future NBA starters, or 3 of them, and maybe a really good 6-man off the bench. Instead, they didn't get that. Then in the second round, they draft Jordan Bell just to sell him to the Warriors for $3.5 million. What the fuck are you doing? Try and extort a future first-rounder out of Golden State if they wanted Jordan Bell so goddamn bad. Chicago, Reinsdorf, you can't be that cash-strapped. Especially since you just said Jimmy Butler's old max contract on the way, and you're not going to have to pay him a super max in a couple of damn years. What the fuck are you doing? And then on top of that, you got Foreman and Paxson with no clear vision or direction for what the fuck they want to do long term. They also got no future draft pick currency out of this deal. So you couldn't even bother to extort if you're going to say, hey, if we give up 16 this year, you're giving us Minnesota at least your first rounder next year. That's how it should have went down. I don't give a fuck. If this was the best offer that you got, maybe it's because other teams around the league know how stupid John Paxson and Gar Forman are when it comes to their specific roles right now, how much they don't know what the hell they're doing when it comes to running an NBA organization. And teams felt like they didn't have to offer much because these guys had no ability to create leverage. They had no skill for negotiation. And ding dong, what do you fucking know? That's exactly what the hell was borne out to be true. Now, to me, the Jimmy Butler trade is not one of these all-time epic, need of rant type of situations because there are potential positives to dealing Butler, and I understand that. And the reality is there's no guarantee that long-term he would have stayed with the organization. He was close to being able to opt out of his contract. He could have been one of those guys that ended up going to LA to play with Paul George, let's say, if LeBron didn't go there. And then the Bulls would be looking at getting nothing for Jimmy Butler. And in the grand scheme of things, let us say this, to be fair, Paxson, Foreman, they once drafted Jimmy Butler with the 30th overall pick in the 2011 draft, and he became an all-star and an all-NBA level type of player. So maybe they like Zach Lavine, Chris Dunn, Lauri Markkanen. Maybe they feel like 1 or 2 of those guys can become potential future stars. Maybe they feel Zach Lavine in a situation where he can be the guy, can really be the guy and be a future all-star. And that may be true. So I don't want to completely bury the deal. But when all is said and done, when you look at what the Bulls did get compared to what you maybe expected they should have been able to get, when you look at the fact that they sold a second-round pick for $3.5 million and got themselves no additional leverage in future drafts, did this Butler deal and got no additional leverage in future drafts. You talk about giving up pick 16. So basically what you really got was a 2-guard at the end of his rookie deal on a bad ACL, a point guard unproven who didn't show much of his rookie year, even though I like him, with bad shoulders and Chris Dunn, and draft position to be able to get Lauri Markkanen, who is, again, another player that I actually like quite a bit. And maybe that's part of the reason why I'm not completely blasting this deal, because the Bulls got pieces and commodities I like. But just because you get pieces and commodities that somebody likes doesn't make it a good deal. Nobody that I look at in terms of who the Bulls got really looks like, to me, a future franchise changer or a future franchise player. And whether Bulls fans and the Bulls media are smart enough to admit it or not, Butler was a franchise player for whatever that was worth. You don't give up franchise players for bags of peanuts. And while I don't know that the Bulls got a bag of peanuts, what would you say? Maybe a bag of pistachios? It feels like they could have done better and they could have done more, and they in particular could have improved their draft position in future years, especially if you're completely rebuilding, which clearly you have to be now. Unbelievable. So to me, by all means, no question, the biggest losers of the night in the 2017 NBA draft were my beloved Chicago Bulls, and you'll be damned to convince me otherwise. Let me know what you think about the biggest winners and losers of this draft, and what your thoughts were on the Jimmy Butler trade. And no, Chase Oliver, in case you watch this video, thank you, fuck you, bye!